Bonjour, good morning, afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're here to talk to you about Health Canada's authorization of Novavax's Nuvaxovid COVID-19 vaccine for adults 18 years of age and older. This is the first protein subunit vaccine authorized in Canada to prevent COVID-19 and is another tool in Canada's toolkit against this virus. After an in-depth review of the evidence, we have determined that this vaccine meets the department's stringent safety, efficacy, and quality requirements, and detailed information on Health Canada's review is available on the COVID-19 Vaccines and Treatment portal at covid-vaccine.canada.ca. While the COVID-19 vaccines predominantly in use in Canada are mRNA-based, the Novavax vaccine is a protein subunit vaccine. And the protein subunit vaccines contain small pieces of viral proteins that have been specifically selected for their ability to trigger immunity. They can also be stored at refrigerated temperatures from 2 degrees Celsius to 8 degrees Celsius, which will facilitate distribution across the country. This vaccine has the same objective as the other COVID-19 vaccines, which is to expose a person's immune system to the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein and activate the immune system to make antibodies to neutralize it the next time the person is exposed to the virus. However, the approach is different. mRNA vaccines contain molecular manufacturing instructions for our cells to make the spike protein. With a protein subunit vaccine, a modified version of the spike protein itself is delivered. These vaccines cannot cause COVID-19 because they only contain small purified pieces of proteins and not the virus itself. The protein subunit vaccines are already used for other diseases such as hepatitis B, pertussis, and influenza. Like for all vaccines, people who are vaccinated gain protection against COVID-19 without ever having to risk the serious consequences of getting sick from the virus. In clinical trials of about 45,000 people, the overall efficacy of the Novavax vaccine against symptomatic COVID-19 was approximately 90% in individuals over 18 years of age. It was 100% effective at preventing severe disease when given according to the authorized dosing regimen, that is 2 doses 21 days apart. This efficacy data is based on studies conducted during earlier waves of the pandemic. Preliminary data available at this time suggests that the vaccine also produces neutralizing antibodies against the Omicron variant, but more data is still needed. As a term and condition associated with the authorization, Novavax is required to provide Health Canada with data on protection against current and emerging variants of concern as it becomes available. I know there are likely some questions regarding the effectiveness of this vaccine compared to the mRNA vaccines. However, comparing vaccines is challenging, as the clinical trials were not designed to test the vaccines against each other. That said, all authorized vaccines have been shown to be very effective at preventing what matters most, and that's serious illness with COVID-19. The authorization of additional vaccine can only help and provides an additional option to fight this pandemic. So today, Health Canada has published a number of documents on the COVID-19 vaccines and treatments portal related to the approval, including a high-level summary of the evidence we reviewed, the Canadian product monograph, regulatory decision summary, and the terms and conditions associated with the authorization. With respect to safety, common side effects with this vaccine include pain and tenderness at the injection site, headache, muscle pain, fever, and chills. The majority of adverse reactions in clinical trials were mild to moderate in severity and resolved within a few days, although also these side effects are typical with most vaccines. Across all clinical trials of the vaccine, 2 cases of myocarditis appeared to be associated with the vaccine. Both occurred in young men after their second doses and resolved completely. 2 other cases were possibly associated with the vaccine. However, these participants were also dealing with severe acute infections that were more likely to be the cause. 3 cases were clearly unrelated to the vaccine. Any potential risk of myocarditis with the Novavax vaccine will be closely monitored once it's in use. However, the initial data suggests that this potential risk would be very, very rare, and the benefits of the vaccine continue to outweigh its risks in all of age groups. With 5 vaccines currently authorized, Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada are continuing to actively monitor their safety in the real world. And we monitor for any adverse events or side effects in collaboration with the provinces and territories, international partners, and the manufacturers. As with all vaccines, we will take action if any safety issues are identified, and ongoing reporting of any potential side effects is critical to supporting this monitoring. Canadians can report any possible side effects to their healthcare professionals. Now that another vaccine is authorized for use in Canada. I know people will want to know who will receive them and when they will be available. My colleagues, Dr. Tam and Dr. New, will speak to this in a few moments after comments from Dr. Berthiaume. Thank you. Merci, Miigwech.
Bonjour, merci de vous joindre à nous. Aujourd'hui, nous allons vous parler de l'homologation par Santé Canada du vaccin contre la COVID-19, Nuvaxovid de Novavax, pour les adultes de 18 ans et plus. Il s'agit du premier vaccin à sous-unité protéique homologué au Canada pour prévenir la COVID-19 et d'un autre outil à la disposition du Canada contre ce virus. À la suite d'un examen approfondi des données probantes, nous avons déterminé que ce vaccin satisfait aux exigences rigoureuses du ministère en matière d'innocuité, d'efficacité et de qualité. Des renseignements détaillés sur l'examen de Santé Canada sont accessibles sur le portail des vaccins et traitements pour la COVID-19 à vaccin-covid.canada.ca. Alors que les vaccins contre la COVID-19 principalement utilisés au Canada sont des vaccins à base d'ARN messager, le vaccin de Novavax est quant à lui un vaccin à sous-unité protéique. Les vaccins à sous-unité protéique contiennent de petites particules de protéines virales qui ont été sélectionnées pour leur capacité à déclencher une réponse immunitaire. Ces vaccins peuvent par ailleurs être conservés à une température de réfrigérateur de 2 à 8 degrés Celsius, ce qui simplifiera leur distribution à travers le pays. L'objectif de ce vaccin est le même que celui des autres vaccins contre la COVID-19, c'est-à-dire d'exposer le système immunitaire d'une personne à la protéine de spécule du virus SARS-CoV-2 et de stimuler ce système à produire des anticorps neutralisant le virus si jamais la personne y est éventuellement exposée. Cependant, l'approche est différente. Les vaccins ARN messagers contiennent des instructions moléculaires permettant à nos cellules de fabriquer la protéine de spécule. Dans le cas d'un vaccin à sous-unité protéique, c'est une version modifiée de la protéine de spécule elle-même qui est administrée. Ces vaccins ne peuvent pas causer la COVID-19 parce qu'ils contiennent seulement de petites particules de protéines purifiées et non le virus comme tel. Les vaccins à sous-unité protéique sont déjà utilisés contre d'autres maladies comme par exemple l'hépatite B, la coqueluche et l'influenza. Comme pour tous les vaccins, les personnes vaccinées sont alors protégées contre la COVID-19 sans avoir à courir le risque de conséquences graves liées à la maladie. Dans le cadre d'essais cliniques portant sur environ 45 000 personnes, l'efficacité globale du vaccin de Novavax contre la COVID-19 symptomatique était d'environ 90 % chez les personnes de plus de 18 ans. Et l'efficacité était de 100 % pour prévenir les formes sévères de la maladie lorsqu'administrée selon le schéma posologique autorisé, c'est-à-dire 2 doses à 21 jours d'intervalle. Les données sur l'efficacité sont basées sur des études menées au cours des premières vagues de la pandémie. Les données préliminaires accessibles à l'heure actuelle indiquent que le vaccin génère aussi la production d'anticorps neutralisants contre le variant Omicron, mais plus de données sont nécessaires. Conformément aux modalités de l'homologation, Novavax doit fournir à Santé Canada des données sur la protection contre les variants préoccupants actuels et émergents et au fur et à mesure que celles-ci deviendront accessibles. Je sais qu'il y a probablement des questions au sujet de l'efficacité de ce vaccin par rapport au vaccin à ARN messager. Cependant, il est difficile de comparer les vaccins car les essais cliniques n'ont pas été conçus pour évaluer les vaccins les uns par rapport aux autres. Cela dit, tous les vaccins homologués se sont révélés très efficaces à prévenir ce qui importe le plus, c'est-à-dire les formes graves de la maladie liées à la COVID-19. L'homologation d'un autre vaccin ne peut qu'aider et constitue une autre option pour lutter contre la pandémie. Aujourd'hui, Santé Canada a diffusé un certain nombre de documents liés à l'approbation sur le portail des vaccins et traitements pour la COVID-19, y compris un sommaire des données probantes que nous avons examinées, la monographie du produit canadien, le résumé des décisions réglementaires et les conditions associées à l'homologation. En ce qui concerne l'innocuité, les effets secondaires courants du vaccin comprennent de la douleur et de la sensibilité au point d'injection, des maux de tête, des douleurs musculaires, de la fièvre et des frissons. La majorité des effets secondaires observés pendant les essais cliniques étaient de gravité légère à modérée et se sont résolus en quelques jours. De plus, ces effets secondaires sont typiques de la plupart des vaccins. Lors des essais cliniques du vaccin, 2 cas de myocardite ont semblé être associés au vaccin. Les 2 se sont produits chez de jeunes hommes après leur 2e dose et ils ont complètement guéri. 2 autres cas pourraient être associés au vaccin. Toutefois, ces participants étaient également atteints d'infections aiguës graves, davantage susceptibles d'en être la cause. 3 autres cas n'avaient aucun lien avec le vaccin. Tout risque possible de myocardite associé au vaccin de Novavax sera surveillé de près une fois qu'il sera utilisé. Cependant, les données initiales suggèrent que ce risque est très rare et que les avantages du vaccin l'emportent sur les risques pour tous les groupes d'âge. Nous aurons désormais 5 vaccins homologués et Santé Canada et l'Agence de la santé publique du Canada continueront de surveiller activement leur innocuité dans le monde réel. Nous surveillons tout effet secondaire ou indésirable en collaboration avec les provinces et les territoires, les partenaires internationaux et les fabricants. Comme pour tous les vaccins, nous prendrons les mesures nécessaires si des problèmes d'innocuité sont décelés. Le signalement de tout effet indésirable potentiel est essentiel pour appuyer cette surveillance et la population canadienne peut signaler tout effet secondaire possible à leurs professionnels de la santé. Maintenant que notre vaccin est homologué au Canada, je sais que les gens voudront savoir qui le recevra et quand il sera disponible. Mes collègues, la Dr Tam et le Dr Nou, vont maintenant vous en parler. Merci.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. As Dr. Sharma and Dr. Berthiaume just announced today, Health Canada authorized Novavax Nuvaxovid COVID-19 vaccine for use as a primary series in adults 18 years of age and over, making it the first protein-based COVID-19 vaccine authorized for use in Canada. The Public Health Agency of Canada has also released recommendations from the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, or NACI, on the use of Novavax vaccine based on current scientific evidence and NACI's expert opinion. The clinical trial data available to date show that Novavax vaccine is effective in preventing confirmed symptomatic COVID-19 disease in the short term. Through ongoing monitoring, both the Public Health Agency of Canada and Health Canada will continue to gather real-world data on the safety of the vaccine, including myocarditis and pericarditis, the duration of protection, and the vaccine's effectiveness against the Delta and Omicron variants. A primary series of the Novavax vaccine is currently considered to be 2 doses. As with other COVID-19 vaccines, people may receive 2 doses of Novavax or a mixed series, meaning 1 dose of the Novavax vaccine and 1 dose of another COVID-19 vaccine. NACI continues to recommend mRNA vaccines for most people due to their excellent protection and well-established safety profiles, which are based on the large body of evidence accumulated from hundreds of millions of vaccines administered around the world. NACI recommends that the Novavax vaccine may be offered to individuals who are unable or unwilling to receive an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. It is not currently authorized for use as a booster dose, but it may be offered as a booster to individuals who are unable or unwilling to receive an mRNA vaccine, regardless of which COVID-19 vaccine they received for their primary series. It is anticipated that doses will begin arriving in Canada in March. Once here, provincial and territorial governments will manage vaccine administration. Having more authorized COVID-19 vaccines provides provinces and territories with an additional option to consider in their vaccination programs. As well, it can help remove barriers to vaccination by providing an additional option to adults who have not yet received a COVID-19 vaccine. At this time, it is particularly important that we continue doing what we can to relieve the pressure on our hospitals by closing vaccine coverage gaps and layering on core personal protective practices. Vaccination is one of the strongest, most important layers of protection, as being up to date with your COVID-19 vaccine substantially lowers the risk of severe illness. Novavax's Nuvaxovid COVID-19 vaccine offers a new option for protection for people who have not yet been vaccinated. It is not too late to get your first, second, or booster dose of the COVID-19 vaccines that are available to you. No vaccine is 100% effective, so keep layering up by wearing a high-quality, well-fitting mask or respirator, avoiding crowds, and improving indoor ventilation to reduce your risk of COVID-19. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Comme viennent de l'annoncer le Dr Sharma et le Dr Berthiaume, Santé Canada a autorisé aujourd'hui l'utilisation du vaccin contre le COVID-19, Nuvaxovid, de Novavax, en tant que série primaire chez les adultes de 18 ans et plus, ceux qui ont fait le premier vaccin contre COVID-19 à base de protéines dont l'utilisation est autorisée au Canada. L'Agence de la santé publique du Canada a également publié des recommandations du Comité consultatif national de l'immunisation, ou CCNI, sur l'utilisation du vaccin de Novavax, fondé sur les données scientifiques actuelles et sur l'avis d'experts du CCNI. Les données des essais cliniques disponibles à ce jour montrent que le vaccin de Novavax est efficace pour prévenir la maladie symptomatique de la COVID-19 confirmée à court terme. Grâce à une surveillance continue, l'Agence de la santé publique du Canada et Santé Canada continueront de recueillir des données réelles sur l'innocuité du vaccin, y compris la myocardite et la péricardite, la durée de la protection et l'efficacité du vaccin contre les variants Delta et Omicron. On considère actuellement qu'une série primaire du vaccin de Novavax comprend 2 doses. Comme pour tous les autres vaccins contre le COVID-19, les personnes peuvent recevoir 2 doses de Novavax ou une série mixte, c'est-à-dire une dose de vaccin de Novavax et une dose d'un autre vaccin contre la COVID-19. Le CCNI continue de recommander les vaccins à ARN messager pour la plupart des gens en raison de leur excellente protection et de leur profil d'innocuité bien documenté qui repose sur le vaste ensemble de données probantes accumulées à partir de centaines de millions de vaccins administrés dans le monde. Le CCNI recommande que le vaccin de Novavax puisse être proposé aux personnes qui ne peuvent ou ne veulent pas recevoir un vaccin à ARN messager contre la COVID-19. Il n'est pas actuellement autorisé comme dose de rappel, mais il peut être proposé comme dose rappel aux personnes qui ne peuvent ou ne veulent pas recevoir un vaccin à ARN messager, quel que soit le vaccin contre la COVID-19 qu'elles ont reçu pour leur série primaire. On attend l'arrivée des doses au Canada en mars. Une fois au pays, les gouvernements provinciaux et territoriaux seront responsables de gérer l'administration des vaccins. L'autorisation d'un vaccin anti-covidique supplémentaire constitue une nouvelle option vaccinale contre la COVID-19 aux provinces et aux territoires dans le cadre de leur programme de vaccination. En outre, cela élimine les barrières à la vaccination pour les personnes qui n'ont pas encore reçu le vaccin contre la COVID-19. Pour le moment, nous devons tout mettre en œuvre afin d'éviter de surcharger nos systèmes de santé, de combler les écarts en couverture vaccinale et de maintenir les multiples couches mesures de protection. Il importe d'être à jour avec ces vaccins contre la COVID-19 car ceux-ci diminuent considérablement les risques de maladies graves. Le Novavax offre une nouvelle option de protection aux personnes qui n'ont pas encore été vaccinées. Il n'est pas trop tard pour recevoir une première ou une deuxième dose ou une dose de rappel des vaccins contre la COVID-19 qui vous sont offerts. Aucun vaccin n'est efficace à 100%. Alors, continuez à porter un masque de qualité bien ajusté ou un respirateur. Évitez les foules et améliorez la ventilation intérieure pour réduire votre risque de contracter la COVID-19. Merci. Thank you. Miigwech.
On prendra des questions, une question, un suivi. Once again, sorry to the doctors for the timing there at the start. We're going to take questions. We've got 2 lined up on the call so far. So I will start with Jacques Galland from the Toronto Star.
Hi, good afternoon. My first question is for Dr. Sharma in terms of the effectiveness against Omicron. So if I understand correctly, Health Canada is still waiting on confirmatory data about the effectiveness against Omicron. So I'm wondering if you could explain why not wait until you get that data before authorizing the use of the vaccine.
Sure. So thank you. You're right. So the major, what we call pivotal trials, were done at a time where the alpha, beta, and the gamma strains were the predominant ones. We did go to all of the vaccine manufacturers as well as all of the manufacturers for treatments against COVID-19 and asked them to submit information about the potential effectiveness against the Omicron variant, Novavax did provide some information that's lab-based. So in those lab-based studies, they did test their vaccine against the Omicron variant, and what it showed was that there were antibodies that were formed. That doesn't give you a complete picture, but we know that the formation of those neutralizing antibodies gives us a good indication that there would be activity against the Omicron variant. In addition to that, they do have ongoing studies in adolescents, and they've released some information from those last week. Those were conducted in Delta times, where the Delta wave was predominant, and there's likely some Omicron cases in there as well. And so far, that data has shown that it would likely be have some effectiveness against that. So when we look at that in the context of all the information that we have and what we know about the other vaccines and how they work, it does look like there would be significant activity against Omicron. So rather than wait to authorize until we get all of that data, which might take some time, we know that there is a good amount of supportive data to show that there would probably be some good activity against Omicron. And as I mentioned earlier, there would be requirements for them to continue to provide data as it became available.
Great, thanks a lot. And my second question, I think it might be for Dr. Tam, because it has to do with boosters. And I heard what you said about Novavax and boosters. And I just wanted to make sure I understood clearly that if an individual were to get 2 doses of the Novavax vaccine, would they be required to get a booster dose? And could that booster dose be Novavax?
There's currently no available data. Well, it's not authorized by Health Canada, the Novavax vaccine as a booster. However, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization has said that the vaccine may be offered as a booster dose to individuals who are unable or unwilling to get the mRNA vaccine, but that is a off-label use, and that informed consent would be needed, of course, to discuss the benefits and risks with the individuals who are getting that booster. And that's very different from what you've asked, I believe, in your question about requirements. And so that's an entirely separate discussion right now. There's no jurisdictions across Canada that I know of who is adding that booster requirement in their vaccine proofs or mandates, but this is an area of ongoing discussion within the public health domain at the different levels of government.
Perhaps to add to that, I mean, in terms of how many doses are required, it really is depending on a couple of things. One is, following people that have had 2 doses to see what happens to their immunity. So when we talked about 3rd doses or booster doses for the other vaccine, it's because we started seeing some of that immunity wane or decrease. That's a monitoring that'll have to happen with the Novavax vaccine as well to see how long that protection lasts. And then we would need studies to show that when you get a booster, then it does actually do something, that it provides that immune boost. And we know that Novavax has already started to conduct those studies for boosters. So that's why at this point in time, we've authorized the 2 doses. And then based on those ongoing studies, when we get more information, that will be able to indicate whether or not a 3rd dose would be needed and how long after the 2nd dose would be the best time to get it.
Thank you. Our next question is from Kelly Geraldine Malone with the Canadian Press.
I'm not sure who's best to answer this, but will the rollout in March be vaccines that are manufactured in Canada at that Montreal facility?
I can answer that question. No, it would not. It is the vaccine that we will be receiving in March will come from India, from the Serum Institute.
And a follow-up to that, when is that manufacturing facility for Canada to create its own vaccine supply expected to be running now that this is approved? And how much is expected to be kind of brought into Canada in those first rounds of doses coming?
So I am going to have to refer you to other departments on the domestic site timelines. But I will say that, of course, Canada has contracted for a significant supply of Novavax vaccine. And we're currently working with the provinces and territories to determine the requirements, given that the majority of Canadians have rolled up their sleeves and got vaccines. So that is an ongoing work. We do expect a supply to come into March. That will be informed also by the provincial territorial requirements. But just stay tuned because there'll be further information provided as we know more.
And perhaps to add to that as well, when the vaccine is authorized, we also authorize different sites. So those sites have to meet what we call good manufacturing practice standards. They have to be inspected to be able to reliably manufacture vaccines so that the first vaccine that comes off that line is exactly the same as the millionth dose that comes off that line. So for this authorization, as Dr. Tam has said, the Serum Institute of India facility has been authorized as part of that, as well as sites in the United States. In order for the Canadian site to be included in that authorization, it would have to demonstrate that they can reliably produce that vaccine. And before that happens, once they're in production, then Health Canada would go in and inspect that site. So the reason we don't have a timeline yet for it is because they haven't indicated to us that they're ready to have that inspection. But as soon as they're ready, we have inspectors on standby to go into the facility to assure that it meets the standards. But as we said, the first supply for Novavax would be coming in from the Serum Institute of India.
Thank you. I have a question myself, and then we'll go back to the ones in the queue. It's Dylan Robertson with Winnipeg Free Press. A question for Dr. Tam. I wanted to know about public trust and the reporting of errors in vaccination rollouts. The Manitoba government mislabeled a box of Pfizer doses, and so nurses at a First Nation froze them for too long and then administered shots that were likely not effective. They're now working to rectify that issue and give updated shots, but the Manitoba government won't say whether it mislabeled just one box or multiple boxes. I know you don't run ISC or provincial systems, but I'm wondering what amount of disclosure these bodies owe to the public about mistakes in order to shore up vaccine confidence.
I think that in the rollout of the biggest vaccination campaign in the history of Canada, there's always going to be some bumps in the road. And so in such huge operational contexts, there will be some mistakes that may have been made or errors that needs to be corrected. I think the most important thing is to, of course, learn from those and rectify any specific gaps in terms of lessons learned. So as you say, I actually don't know any of the details. What I do know is that different people involved are trying to gather the data and looking at what happened. And also, I think Health Canada also contributed in terms of stability or other data related to vaccines under certain conditions. So I think it is important for a clear communication of what's went on. But I can't speak to any of the details.
For sure. Thank you, Dr. Tam. And just as a follow-up, I don't know how you'd quantify this, but do you know how often this has happened? Like, is this the first time you've heard in Canada of like a mislabeled box or, doses that had expired getting administered?
I don't have that statistics, unfortunately, but I haven't heard of any significant numbers. That's all I can say. But I know that on the operational level, these events can certainly occur. But it would be rare, and if I certainly haven't heard of that many instances.
Thank you very much. We're going to go back to the two participants on the call unless anyone else shows up in the queue here. So first up is Jacques Galland with the Toronto Star.
Hi. First, I just wanted to ask a quick clarification question about the doses arriving in March. I'm wondering, can you confirm how many doses are expected to arrive in March?
I can't confirm that. I think there will be further updates, for example, from Public Service and Procurement Canada, which is part of their responsibilities. But on our end, we are consulting with the province territories in terms of their needs.
Thanks. And then the question I did want to ask is for you, Dr. Tam, and it's on testing, the pre-departure testing measures we heard announced this week. I've heard from members of the public who are wondering, for crossing the land border into the U.S. does not require a pre-departure test, but a pre-departure test is required by Canada to cross the land border from the U.S. into Canada. So I'm wondering why maintain that requirement in light of the fact that the U.S. does not have that requirement.
Yeah, so I think ministers had announced the changes in border measures earlier this week, and I'm sure all of those policies will be reviewed on an ongoing basis. Right now, what we do know is that there's quite a high positivity rate of individuals who are tested as they arrive in Canada, including those from the United States. So I do think that as the Omicron wave descends in Canada, the US is also observing a gradual deceleration of their Omicron wave as well. But right now, there is actually quite a high level of viral activity. And so I think that those data will be reevaluated on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Our next question is Kelly Geraldine Malone from the Canadian Press.
So considering the recent data from Novavax in regards to the efficacy of the vaccine in children, how far is Health Canada away from having this approved for use in children here, especially considering lots of parents have shown hesitancy around mRNA vaccines for their kids?
Right, so a week ago today, Novavax released some interim sort of preliminary results from their pediatrics trial in adolescents, and that was in ages 12 to 17, and it did show good immune response in that age group. So Novavax is going through that data, it's assembling it and assessing it, and they're expected to provide Health Canada with a submission in the coming weeks, but we haven't received that yet. As soon as we get it, we would review it on a priority basis, as we do with all the COVID-19 vaccines. And if it meets the standards, we would authorize it, but we still haven't received it yet.
I don't know if you had a follow-up, Kelly?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I think that ends our press conference then. I want to thank everyone for sharing these answers today and this information, and stay safe out there.
You too. Thank you.